coming up, but yeah, Rick Astley is happening for Sainsbury. So
Wow.
Sainsbury's obviously paid some money to have old Rick Astley
Well, they never could give
featuring
him up,
there.
could they? Yeah.
Oh, here we go again with your
Sorry,
with your copywriting
my Rick
talents.
roll. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I just find it really, really interesting because, yeah, Rick Astley, I think he kind of does some touring on one of
I've seen him
those
tour
like
with the
old
Foo
school
Fighters,
circuits.
actually. And I mean, Rick
Okay.
Astley, you can say what you like about Rick Astley. He's got a great voice, but
Sure. But I mean, as a star, as someone who's got like drawing
definitely.
power, so it's there's so many other stars that you could have chosen,
Sure.
but you've chosen specifically one from the 80s, and I think that's what the theme is that the nostalgia is strong.
Mm.
It's about the times gone by when Christmas was, Christmas. It was not just about shopping. It was about having a good time with your family and listening to a few tunes and maybe drinking too much. And the retailers are trying to capture that, which is great. Yeah.
It seems to be a kind of a a doubly beneficial sort of relationship. You've got Buble, who was definitely a chart topper in his day. Perhaps now he's maybe in the autumn years of his career. And then you've got a massive retailer willing to put him front and center. So it seems like it's an exchange that definitely goes both ways. And Christmas, what better time to even in supermarkets now where I live in Spain, you can already see the Christmas fever starting to kind of build up. The aisles are stocked with Christmas
Right.
products and all the decorations and all that. So it's there's no doubting that it's the biggest kind of retail event in the year, right? Next to sort of
Sure.
Easter and Halloween. So everyone is pulling
Yeah.
out the stops. It's just standard practice, right?
Well, for many retailers these days, you kind of make your year on Black Friday and Christmas.
Mm.
Increasingly, Black Friday pulls Christmas forward for a lot of retailers. So you have to put almost everything into Black Friday, because if you don't, potentially that share of wallet is going to disappear somewhere else early. So it's become quite strategic. And I suppose for me, when I look at the kind of ads that these big retailers are producing, it also tells you who their core shopper is. So the core shopper would be a middle-aged, I guess, white person who listens to Michael Bublé in the UK. Because when I look at the ad, it's quite niched into that target market. So that's the market that they're serving. That's who they're trying to attract and to impress. Which, yeah, it's a very traditional market, if I have to if I have to say it in that way. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just that I'm quite surprised, because I suppose nowadays everyone's trying to go for a younger market. They're trying to attract a younger shopper, potentially quite a diverse shopper. But when it comes to Christmas, people go all in on much more of a traditional looking marketplace.
You're the retail expert here, so I suppose maybe it's a silly question, but
Careful with that
for me,
label.
for me, I've always wondered, like, and Jade, listening in on Humble Mind on our conversation, has just commented Coca-Cola has just released their new Christmas promo. So it's not just a retail game; it's massive brands, obviously, all
Right.
capitalize on this time of year. So that makes sense. But I've always wondered what happens if the kinds of places, let's say retail, Asda, all of the main chains, who know they can expect a significant amount of traffic through their doors during this time. Is there any danger of not promoting? Do they need to be pushing all of this, as much as they do? Because it's always going to be a cyclical game, right? You're always going to have people coming
Right.
in, doing their Christmas shopping, spending their day in the mall, and moving out. Like, so what is the benefit of throwing, $200 million into a massive ad and paying off Michael Bublé, the biggest sort of payday he's had since it's been a holly jolly Christmas,
Yeah.
what is the significance? What's the kind of the need to keep on investing year after year if it's such a staple?
Excellent question, Alex. Many years ago, I did a significant amount of work for a very well-known online kitchenware retailer here in South Africa. And we early on put in a policy where we said no Black Friday. We're not going to do any Black Friday promotion whatsoever. We're not getting involved with this thing. And funnily enough, every single year as Black Friday took off in this region, we would get a vast amount of traffic and sales as a consequence of it being Black Friday without us doing any form of promotion. So we didn't spend any money on discount. We didn't spend any money on promotion, but we still got the pickup. So I think that's such a good point, because as you say, everyone's in the festive spirit. Everyone is shopping in any case. So why spend the money on trying to compete in a very crowded marketplace, which just shoots the price of your customer acquisition costs through the roof.
Right.
And then you're trying to play catch up and claw back that revenue that you've already spent. So I think that there would be retailers who do that. And funny enough, when I was doing my search as to who's doing what, retailers like Harrods, Selfridges, they don't really seem to get involved. I think Selfridges in London spend a lot of time and effort on their windows. And I think that's become somewhat of a tourist attraction. It becomes, a mainstay of what their brand is all about. But they don't necessarily get involved in the bun fight of Christmas ads as such. So I think you raise a very good point, is that you've got to think strategically about these things, and you've got to decide where you're going to play strongly. Are you going to play strongly in the Black Friday area? Are you going to go for Christmas? Or are you just going to save the money and hope that you can ride it out just with a little bit of in-store promotion? I'm kind of with you on that. I like the idea of lying low and just letting my neighbors draw in the crowds, and then I'll just capture them, when they walk past. I think that that's a pretty smart move. It's a pretty shrewd way of thinking about things. And it comes back to this idea that as a great marketer or as a great strategist, you've got to question your assumptions. Just because it's that time of the year doesn't mean to say that you have to pull the same trigger that everyone else is doing. It might be worthwhile just not spending the money and seeing what happens.
At the same time though, I can't think of any major kind of retail or brand or corporate executive going the whole way and making that decision, because as Jade, who's following along in Humble Mind, as she just commented again, the reason is why these guys invest, so many hundreds of millions of dollars during this time is because you tug on heartstrings. It's buy-in from the consumer on the brand, not just the product. And I suppose that's true.
But I guess it is true. But what you would need to do is you would need to A/B test your theory there. So again, Michael Bublé is going to be costing you probably £1 million. All right. So there's £1 million gone off your bottom line. You haven't made any sales as yet. Now you've got to claw back that money. If you do the A/B test and you say, right, this year we did Michael Bublé, next year we don't do any Michael Bublé, and let's see what the difference between the two is. My argument with all of these things is that who cares whether people like your ad or whether they share your ad? What you're measuring here is conversion. What you're measuring is, do people come into store? Are they more convinced by my ad as opposed to the Sainsbury's ad, and choose then to do their full Christmas shop with me? Or are they choosing to do a Christmas shop not on just the items which we have promoted? So now you're discounting. There's no margin on those items. So you're losing on those items in any case. So the only real profitability you're getting is from items on the periphery, which you're selling at full margin, right? Everyone following the science here. So I think that's what you've got to consider. And I'm not saying it's an easy choice, but you've got to look at your strategy holistically. And I think often what happens with a Black Friday is that items are discounted, or you're trying to move old items. Customers are savvy. They also know when you're trying to clear stock, which is dead stock. And they get angry and they get agitated with you using the occasion to kind of trick them. So you've got to be you've got to be tactical as to how you approach these things. And I suppose that's what I'm saying, is that there's no clear answer. but you've got to play around with the metrics as to what the various futures might look like, depending on what your play is.
Yes. I suppose it's always going to come down to the fact that, for so many people, at least in the, the sort of the Western world, Christmas is a time of, family spirit, getting together, celebrating, turkeys in the oven, and it's about family, right? Ultimately, obviously, it's a massive, retail opportunity, but that is the imagination space that everyone is appealing to, right? And so it's such an enormous opportunity that it's the kind of thing that someone would, they would never not be spending. They would never not be advertising or making a claim for that space, because ultimately, as Jade said, you're going into the heart space of a client, or in this case, a massive demographic of your audience. And so if they don't see you in the usual Christmas time slot that they're used to seeing you for years and years and years before then, especially if your brand has that kind of long-term traction, it would be weird, right? So it's almost like just paying just to have a minimal membership in that space, I suppose.
Well, now you're almost captured by the season, and
right, yeah.
So you have to be there because people are expecting it, and if you're not, they're going to send you some dirty emails. The reality is that to be there, to just be benchmarking against everyone else, costs an awful lot of money. And potentially also, I don't know, it might be a lot of money that you spend, and it could be taken badly, and then potentially you looked as inferior to everybody else. People are judging your ad, and it's like, well, Sainsbury's won, but I don't know, M&S wasn't so great. So
yeah,
I don't know, why get involved in that? I think my thinking around it is that it becomes a little bit of a bun fight, and I would challenge anyone to actually recall the ad and which brand was that for. Is that a good positive association? And then did it also inspire you to go and shop at that store? Because just making lovely 60-second television commercials is just not good enough.
Totally.
That's, as a strategist, for me, that's a waste of money.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in businesses where decisions were made to do promotions, and those promotions worked, but there was no margin in the promotion. It almost killed the business because, you're now working, you're working a lot, you're being very busy in order to make no money. Ultimately, you're hoping that then you capture that customer's data so that you can sell something else to them later on. Most of those customers are not good customers. They were only there for the specials. So you see what I'm trying to get at is that just because you've attracted people doesn't mean to say you necessarily want the business. I might not actually want to deal with those customers. And that's, I suppose that's a different way of looking at retail.
It's funny you say that, because on the other side, we've got comments coming in on LinkedIn from Jonathan and Leonie saying, that Black Friday is always this major, almost stress kind of inducing event, and also there's this element that it actually feels, as Leonie says, she found last Black Friday sales were deceiving. Some items were more expensive and advertised as cheaper. Plus the sale items are perhaps used to draw in the feet. And then you end up buying other stuff. John says Black Friday has become the big selling week for his retail client, and they're going hard at it again this year. So it's almost like this necessary evil that everyone loves to hate, but we do it anyway, right? It almost feels like it's more habit than anything that's really kind of that's been tried.
But I think, so that's a good point that John makes there. What I would love to know, and I'm not sure if we can ask John, but what I would love to know is that even though it's become like a real revenue spinner for the client, is it good business? So are they, is the revenue carrying sales of items that have like a reasonable margin? Are the people who they're selling to people that they would want to attract and keep? Are they potentially loyal customers that would be good for the business long term?
Yeah.
Because in my experience, they're not necessarily the case. So if you look at a very basic metric, as in, oh, how much income did we get over a period? That's only a very small fraction of what the full story is.
Totally.
I want to know what was happening at the back, because as I say, we ran a very, very successful promotion, which nearly bankrupted a business. It nearly put the business out of business because it was so popular. So for us, that was a campaign which was a massive disaster. And it took a long time to recover from it. So not all of these things are good. I think you've got to look very specific, like holistically around the metrics and what you're trying to achieve with the business. And then you can make better decisions as to how you would promote throughout the year.
I suppose the one sort of bit of silver lining here is Michael Bublé coming to us and singing his beautiful Christmas music. It's almost like the Boney M, but with Frank Sinatra sort of in it, right?
Oh, Michael Bublé wishes he was as big as Boney M. I mean, Boney M, they've retired. They live in, paradise. They don't need to work anymore.
So moving on to the second sort of story, or the bit about this term that you've thrown out called outperformance. So you've been thinking deeply about how big established organizations can not only deliver and do what they do, but also outperform other competitors in the market, perhaps even outperform themselves. And so shine some light on that for us. What does it take to outperform, and what's the toolkit involved there?
So there's always an interesting phenomena for me when it comes to innovation, and when it comes to disruptive technologies or disruptive strategies. A lot of the talk around innovation and the people who do innovation successfully are startups. So young companies that attract a little bit of venture capital, and they've got a great idea. They're out to go and solve like a massive problem, and they're able to scale that solution in a marketplace. And as a result of the success of this venture, they see exponential growth. So we've all heard about the, exponential returns. It's easy for a small company to do, but as we all know, it's almost impossible for a well-established company to achieve the same kind of success. So when it comes to big companies, they look for consistent return for their shareholders. The idea that a big company can generate outperformance is almost unheard of. It's very, very difficult to do. And obviously there are outliers to that. So Apple is a great example of that. Amazon is a good example of that. But in many ways, those companies are structured in order to deliver that kind of outperformance. But for an established business, that's far trickier. Now, on that point, in South Africa, there's an example of a grocery retailer that was able to achieve unbelievable outperformance of their business by sort of putting together an innovation which has fundamentally changed the local retail landscape. And somebody's written a book about that, about how that success was achieved. So I've got the book available on my website. It's for members only. And it's not like it's filled with a lot of secrets. It's filled with basic frameworks that we've all seen before. It's filled with text and information from the greats, Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, Rita McGrath, even Rick Rubin, the renowned music producer, makes an appearance in the book. But if you're interested in innovation, and if you are in an established organization where it is challenging to achieve outperformance for that organization, it's a good book just to get an idea of how a business like the biggest retailer in South Africa was able to achieve their own version of successful outperformance.
So is it worth kind of unpacking some of the elements of what, because I'm sure outperformance varies from from different markets, different leaders, different leadership teams and styles, and commercial objectives that every company is trying to accomplish for themselves. So maybe in this example of this retailer, what went into the ingredients list in order for this to kind of pay off for them?
Okay, so first of all, when you're going to be taking on one of these projects, the idea is not just to have innovation which moves things forward just a little bit. So you don't necessarily want to go from 10% growth to 12% growth. That's not what we would define as outperformance. What we're looking for is that exponential growth, where you go from nothing to capturing the whole market within 3 years. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for ventures that fundamentally change a marketplace, that are so unbelievably successful and profitable, that they really do disrupt the activities of your competitor. So that's first of all what we're talking about when it comes to outperformance. And in order to do that, you really need to risk some of your balance sheet. So you can't just say, oh, well, we're going to put a team on it. Oh, let's hire some people and we'll put a team on it and we'll try and de-risk it as much as possible. You have to be quite audacious in your goal. So you have to spot an opportunity, understandably, with any good strategy, is that you've got to understand where is the opportunity that no one else is necessarily seeing or everyone else is perhaps discounting. And then you've got to risk quite a lot. You've got to risk a line on your balance sheet and say, right, we are going to assign quite a substantial amount of capital to unlocking this opportunity. And then in many ways, the trick is that you can't really create that innovation from within the giant organization. Organizations essentially are a mess. They're a mess of complexity. There are people, there are systems, there are ways of doing things, which is not necessarily the right environment from which you are going to find massive growth or new thinking. So you have to set up something which is separate, but which is well-funded, and where the kind of thinking which is embedded in that separate entity is quite different from the thinking which is within the larger business.
You have to be free of those constraints, right? That's the key.
So, exactly. And you have to be very clear as to what it is you're actually trying to do. So what is the major problem that you're trying to solve with this entity? You can't necessarily just say, right, there's an opportunity for us to be more successful. You've got to say to yourself, there is a major problem or a major challenge which exists out there. We have the capability, we have the ability to put together a project which will solve that massive problem. Should we solve that massive problem, the outcome will obviously be like huge financial reward for us. But actually what's more important is that we're able to take our capacity and resources and utilize the magic that is a company, a very big company, to solve that for the greater good of society. So it sounds a little bit altruistic, but I think that's what's really needed. And if you think about it, think about it logically. You take a couple of guys who have no experience. They might have a degree from, a good university or whatever it might be. You give them some money and out pops Google or Amazon. Now, how is it possible that a couple of guys in a garage who are kind of hustling their way to exponential growth can create some of the most amazing companies and innovations that we know of? But when you have a massive company who have access to cheap capital, they're able to attract talent, they've got all of the systems and processes to really accelerate any great idea, why is it that they then struggle? It just shouldn't be that case. You've got everything going for you. It shouldn't be that this is now a risk. So I think that's one of the interesting things about this book is how can a big organization potentially just be a little better at doing that? How can they go about and approach these opportunities in a different way, in a better way?
It sounds I'm loving the toolkit. So maybe just to play it back, what led to that success was a sense of sort of independence, being able to move away from the mothership, where the same rules maybe don't apply or apply less, a sense of, kind of autonomy on making decisions and going out. Experimentation is definitely part of it. And also having kind of being guided by a very big and audacious, but also very clear goal on what they were setting out to achieve, right? It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to change the world, but they're going out to kind of capture something quite big, but a very identifiable kind of objective that they're going after as well. So that seemed to be part of it. I suppose also, and having a mammoth amount of talent behind you as well, perhaps the kind of talent that normally under normal circumstances, the company would structure differently or maybe would entertain in a different way, I'd imagine as well. But it also, so it seems that for me, just hearing you speak, that kind of exponential growth toolkit that you describe has so much to do with a sense of like nimbleness and agility, right? Being agile, obviously a massive word in those circles. Right. Because the ability to kind of move fast and break things and to kind of move quickly and respond quickly to that is maybe a little bit of luck, thrown in as well. Sometimes the right circumstances, the right focus group, the right people, the right questions being asked, but definitely about kind of the ability to respond and act quickly and get very quickly to a sort of an MVP stage or some kind of minimal product, so that, great, after 4 weeks, here's what we've got. Whereas in the traditional R&D department, it might take them 10 months to get to that part. So much of it seems to be about speed and agility.
Right. And as you say these things, understand as well that what you're saying is the exact opposite of how most businesses are structured. Exactly. And that's not a bad thing. The reality is that when you are a big business, what you need people who are capable of operating the machine as it is. So once you are at speed, once you are at scale, you don't want people coming in and messing up this machine, because should something mess up, I mean, as I said before, it's complex. Everything is interconnected. You go and disrupt some part of a big business, the consequences of that could be catastrophic. And that's not what you want. But that is the very structure which then stifles innovation. And that's why innovation doesn't take off within a big business, because that's not how a big business is structured.
Exactly.
A big business is there to return value to shareholders. That's it. And to do that, they need to focus on optimizing the efficiencies that are within that business. Now, having said that, let me not say that. One of the key things that is required by any big business is that they are in a space which is incredibly fragile, because the world around is changing. And as we know, something could change that you're not necessarily even aware of, and it could make that big machine, that big business, increasingly less relevant within the context as it changes. So it's a very precarious place to be, because if you're the CEO or you're on the board or you're a C-suite executive, you've got to make those big decisions as to when to maintain and when to push forward. And doing that within the complexity of the world is an impossible task, because as you say, what's really required is a separate entity that has more of a mandate to take risk, that is more nimble. Exactly as you say, you've got to be hyper nimble. And the idea there is that you don't necessarily know exactly even what it is that you are building. You have an idea and you have a basic blueprint of how you think you might want to create this value. But as you go along, you will learn more, and the sort of veil of uncertainty which surrounds you will slowly but surely start to dissipate as you move forward. But that's not how people are hired within big organizations. You're hired because you have all the answers. You're hired because you're an expert and a specialist, and you can't walk into a room and say, I don't know. You've got to walk into a room with the answers. That's why you're an expert. And I think that's what the conundrum is how then do you surround yourself with amazing talent, but talent who are happy enough to not know what the answers are, but to go forward regardless. Yeah, so I'm hugely oversimplifying this whole thing. You've got to read the book, but it's a sense, I think, of what that framework might look like.
It's a fascinating sort of dichotomy or relationship between, the structure and the order and the set processes of an organization. Even the word organization implies, a set sort of processes and things that have now been sort of fundamentally set in stone in order to work and in order to cope with scale and size and reach. Then, those things at some point, also because of, uncertainty in the markets and innovation from other forces, those things start to kind of work against you, because now you've lost some of the nimbleness and the agility that is needed. It's almost like, the US government having the most sophisticated army in the world, but, you're still dependent on, black ops sort of Navy SEALs to go in and do the real dirty work for you and kind of come back and report back to base, right? So there's an interesting guerrilla warfare kind of comparison there.
Right. And that's, and I think that's the conundrum around that businesses face. And I suppose that's why Clayton Christensen wrote the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, because that's exactly what you're facing. You're facing a dilemma. What do I do? I'm the leader of an organization. I need to keep my shareholders happy. I need to keep the operations that we currently have going. But at the same time, I know that in a 5-year time horizon, what we do as an organization might be completely outdated. And at the same time, a lot of big organizations struggle to attract the kind of talent that is required in order to solve these problems. How do you do that? It's a very, very complex, challenging task. But it's not to say that there are hard and fast answers as to how to do it, but there's a useful case study and a useful framework as to how at least one big organization was able to do that successfully.
Awesome. And so just lastly, before we wrap up, in terms of the book that we've been talking a little bit about, is that something that people can learn more about by following that link to your site, Outperformance, or?
Yeah, so if you go to cherryflavor.com/outperform, there's a members only area there that if you subscribe, you can access the book. I warn you, the book is nearly 400 pages long, so it's not a quick read, and it is written by someone who was a senior IT professional at the business that we're talking about. So it is also his own reflection on his time spent working on the project. But I think it really does offer some very, very useful insight from an insider's perspective as to what it was like, and just some of the challenges, even within a nimble, hyper-agile organization, what some of the challenges were in achieving that success. So go and have a look.
Fantastic. I will. Well, when it comes to, at least for me, when it comes to long books, I love long books. If it's either that or listening to Michael Bublé, and I think I know where. Yeah, I'd prefer my bread buttered.
I'll wait for Rick Astley.
Might wait a while. John, always a pleasure to talk to you. I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks,
time, same
Alex.
place.
Always great. Yeah. Cheers.
Fabulous. Done.
Cool.